Madonna, Brad Pitt, Kim Kardashian, Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss. He collaborates with them all. Today's guest is possibly the most influential and iconic photographer of fashion, film and music working today. Welcome to Steven Klein.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for being here. Now, also joining us, the clothes he designs are part of a global social project. His latest collection is inspired by his father's job as a refuse collector. His mission, to make fashion less elitist and more inclusive. Hello to the French fashion designer, Mossi Traoré. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, Mossi and Steven, it's Paris Fashion Week. Both of you work in the industry, but your creations subvert our notions of glamour, fame, and beauty. Now, Steven, and we can see your captivating work in your new monograph published by Phaidon. Now, this is an incredible, enormous collection of your work. When you look back at the 30 years of work inside this book, how do you feel?
It's interesting because I think time always tells with photographs. So I think that if a photograph withstands time, it can be a great indication of like what's happening culturally and how times have changed. So I think over the 30 years, I have many of the same relationships. I've had 20-year and 30-year relationships of working with people, models like Naomi and Kate, and with actors as 20 years with Madonna and Brad Pitt. So I think that it's kind of like they're a family, and they're also a family of people that I bring back. They're like my actors coming back to work again and again in my movies.
And they do tell a story, and we see nudity, gender fluidity, pyromania, murder, and bodies are sometimes contorted, faces are masked. What do you think these sexy, violent, tense, and wild photos are saying about today's world? I
always think that as a photographer, you have to be somewhat of a journalist. And I think that you have to reflect the sign of the times and what's going on in the times. And I think we live in a violent, kind of unsettling times. So I try to, and I think it just inherently comes in my work to provoke in the same way for people to look at images in a different way, as opposed to fashion portraying itself as like this idealistic, perfect world. I rather dive into things that reflect our times.
So do you see yourself as an anti-fashion photographer?
No, because I actually like fashion, and being at the show, like being at Balmain 2 nights ago, it was like, wow, I love the idea of like fashion as a theatrical performance. And sometimes it's disappointing to only have one piece or one to photograph, to document fashion is quite difficult. But I usually think of fashion as like costumes in my narratives. And I'm not anti-fashion. This book maybe doesn't have like the best, it's not like the best of fashion, but it's actually based more on photography.
And I wanted to talk about one photo that really caught my eye. It's part of your Suburbia series that you did for American Vogue some years ago. Now, these are sex dolls. What do you think of this photo, Mossi? I just wanted to ask you, can you see it on the screen?
Yeah, it's a very creative job, and when you're a designer, to find a good photographer who can understand your vision, your message, it's a very important point. And a good photographer is someone who has good eyes. So I can feel his work is very amazing.
Tell us about this photo, because they're sex dolls, aren't they?
Well, they are sex dolls. And actually, during COVID, I didn't have access to models, so I actually had 2 sex dolls at my farm, and I was using them as my muses during that time. This particular picture was, I did many single images with Anna Wintour for Vogue magazine. This one I think was based on Botox and fillers. So my idea was that people were kind of like filling themselves and people are doing a lot of Botox and fillers and implants and so I thought it'd be appropriate to use dolls because people have kind of like mimicking dolls. Well, not at all, but people are mimicking dolls. So the thing is, that was the premise of the article. So we had the dolls there, and we were just getting ready to shoot, and they just didn't look right. So what I did is I actually pulled off the faces to reveal what was inside the dolls. And the editor and I had a big fight, and they said, well, Anna would never run these pictures, but in fact, she really liked the picture. And it's actually one of my favorite images that I did from the series, which is called The Domestic Women. I've done many of them for Vogue.
Now, do you think there are some images in the book, there are so many pictures, like Brad Pitt pinning down Angelina on a bed with his hand over her mouth, for example, that you wouldn't be able to do today in a world that's a bit more taboo?
Yes. I think many of the pictures in the book I wouldn't be able to do today because a lot of them are taboo or they be considered offensive. And that particular picture was part of a story. So the thing is, in the context of that particular image alone, it probably says it's violence, but it was the original story was about a domestic family that took place in the 60s, and that when things during that time were very idealistic, but it shows the cracks that actually would happen. So that picture was part of a longer story. But again, that picture probably would not be published today as many other ones in my book.
Now, Madonna appears more than any other person in the book. You've been working with her, I think, for more than 20 years. I imagine that someone like Madonna has very clear ideas about how she wants to work. I mean, how do you manage these enormous celebrities when you're working with them?
Well, first I'd like to have a conversation with them. First time we worked together, Madonna and I worked together, it was very intimidating because I thought, here's a person that's done everything that can be done, and what am I going to do with her? And the first one is always the most difficult one. But the thing is, we collaborate well together. I like the collaboration process, and I think we both see things alike. We like similar movies. We both love riding horses, and we like to be provocative in some ways. So I think our relationship has grown, and each time we've done a project, it's been challenging, but we work as collaborators, and I think that that's the beauty of creating art or photography or films together with somebody that has similar visions.
Now, Mossi, the world of fashion, it can seem out of the normal person's reach, but you're determined that that won't be the case in your work. You've described your label as Made in Banlieue, which could be translated as Made in the Hood. Mm-hmm. Describe your mission.
Today, for me, it's not a question about a mission, it's more about a value. So for me, with fashion, we can have a very positive social impact on a city, on some people. Maybe with fashion, you can help people in need. So I'm very inspired by a lady, her name is Leila Jannah. She is my business model. She was died 2 years before, but she did amazing work in Africa. So when you want to help people, poor people, it's not really charity, but you have to give them jobs. So for me, every day I can sell is job opportunity for someone. So that is my conception and my vision with what can I do with fashion, how I can bring fashion in my city, my suburb. You know, when I was young, maybe if fashion was not coming to me, I can finish in prison maybe because you have drugs business.
So just to tell people watching, you grew up in the disadvantaged social projects just outside of Paris. But since then, you have trained in fashion. You've worked at Paris's Opera Garnier as a dresser. You started your own label. You opened a fashion school, which is actually in the suburbs and where you're from. In 2020, you won the Pierre Berger Fashion Prize. Where did you get this love of fashion then?
So if you want, for example, the school project, first it was... I wanted to pay a tribute to Mrs. Gray, Madame Gray, who was for me one of the most famous lady. I met one lady who have worked with her, and she teach me Madame Gray haute couture hand.
It was
technique.
A designer from 1930s here in Paris.
And I said, okay, I want to pay a tribute to this lady. And after that, I said, why I want to create a school in my suburb? Because all the fashion schools are in Paris. But I want to take French haute couture and to bring that in the suburb and to give opportunity to everyone who wants to learn and study in fashion industry, and not about your pocket money, just about your passion. So that was one idea. And I did some exhibition photo with some friend in my suburb because I wanted to take art, culture to the wall of the suburb. So like my quarter is like a museum for me. And I'm happy when I see a children with mother who was working and stop to watch the photo. I say, this is my vision of what we can do with culture.
To bring it to the suburbs. Now, your dad was a refuse collector. Your mum and was a housekeeper. Both came from Mali. We live in an era of fast fashion. Lots of our clothes are ending up in landfill. But your new collection is inspired by your father's job. a noble job. Is it a way of questioning the industry?
Of course, if you want, my next collection is inspired by a refugee collector because I wanted to pay tribute one day to my dad because every morning he woke up very early to go and work hard to clean Paris, but just to get some money to help his family here, but also in Africa. And I say, wow, my dad is a big man, and I want to pay tribute because he supported me when I started to study in fashion industry. He was behind me to support me when I quit my first brand. I say, no, he's not in, he's died, but I want to pay tribute to him. And also the second message is about, politic fighting to say Paris is dirty, Paris is dirty. But why Paris is dirty? It's because of people, not because of these people who work very hard. So I wanted with this collection to give a message to say, hey guys, we have, Paris will become clean because of all of us. So we have to work together to try to be a better citizen. And with that, Paris is the most beautiful city of the world. Paris has to be the most clean city of the world.
What do you think your father would think if he saw your collection being presented next week?
I think he will found that very funny to say, you're inspired by my job for your fashion project. But I think he will be proud. And not only my dad, but all my friends, their dad was doing the same jobs. It's not only a tribute to my only dad, but for all the fathers who work very hard to help their family.
Stephen, tell us what you've managed to see during Fashion Week, which is going on at the moment.
Off the plane, I went to see Balmain, which was brilliant. And it was a surprise share came out at the end, which was a big surprise for everybody, I think. And then I saw Rick Owens' show yesterday, which was also great.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you both on the show. We're going to play out with the Balmain show. Mossi Traoré, you're presenting your new collection at the department store Printemps on the 4th of October. Thank you for being here. And Steven Klein, your new monograph, published by Phaidon, is available now. Enjoy the rest of Fashion Week. Thank you for joining us. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.